Hello, and welcome to Inspire Tokyo. I'm Chris Galucci. The Inspire Tokyo podcast is brought to you by Kikoku Shijo Academy in Tokyo, Japan. On this show, we interview leading figures in science, the arts, education, business, and politics to help young bilingual students learn more about potential career paths for their future. Philosophy is a field that is often misunderstood. When many people think of philosophy, they conjure up images of bearded men in ancient times sitting on marble steps and talking about thinking. The truth is that philosophy is so much more. Nowadays, the work of philosophers have wide-reaching political, legal, and ethical importance. My guest on the show today is Zárdai István Zoltán. He is a philosopher with a keen interest in artificial intelligence. He is investigating moral psychology, action and agency, and the links between responsibility, intention, and voluntariness. He is a JSPS postdoc research fellow at Keio University. If you're new to philosophy, our conversation will give you a great sense of what it's all about. And if you're interested already, then you'll love listening to István. He's exceptionally clever and a clear communicator, and his passion for philosophy is contagious. Hello, István. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Chris. Thank you for inviting me and having me here.
Absolutely. My pleasure. So to get started, can you just give us a little bit about your background? Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to become a philosopher.
Oh, wow. So I'm originally from Hungary, from the southwest of the country, a smaller town called Pécs. And I went to uni there. It's a top 5 uni in Hungary. But already before the uni, I got interested in philosophy, which is thanks to my mom.
Your mother, okay.
Always reading a lot of books. And she gave me a brilliant book by Jostein Gardner, Sophie's World. Which is an excellent introduction to philosophy and many of the issues that move most philosophers throughout history.
Did you go to school, your university, were you studying in Hungarian or were you studying in English?
So at the time, there was a very funky system in Hungary where you could take on 2 majors at the same time. So I did an English literature and culture, which was fully in English. We did everything in English, prepare presentations, read, write, discuss. And then I did a full philosophy program. That was mostly in Hungarian, but luckily every year we could have 2 courses in English or German or French.
Oh, I see. And Sophie's World, did you read that in English?
Oh, no, that was in Hungarian. I was still at high school and just figuring out what I want to do.
I see. I ask these questions about language because I know that language plays an important role in philosophy, but I'll get to that a little bit later. Yeah. So after university?
Yeah, so my luck was that at uni, one of my teachers, I loved his classes. He was always talking a lot with us, discussing a lot. It really got us going. And he recommended me to join a special college, which was preparing people who wanted to go and do research. So already as students, we could start doing small presentations, attend conferences, help with the organization and things like that. So the road to a PhD was pretty much paved for me this way.
Really?
And I got a nice TA research fellowship there first. So for 2 years, I stuck to the same university in Hungary.
Okay.
And I was teaching some classes. And the good thing there was that Hungary just adopted at the time the BA-MA system. We used to have the German system where you enroll and you finish with a master. So you do 5 years or 6 years straight away after enrollment. But because of this, the MA system was still very much in the shaping. So I could design my own courses and modules. They gave me so much freedom to do these classes and what I was interested in at the time.
This is the DMA system? What does that stand for?
The old German system is basically built on the idea that you need a proper academic wissenschaftliche education where you can do in-depth studies on your field, but also you can get a broad learning. So we had to do some things, even though we were in humanities, we had to have a rough idea of the up-to-date ideas in science.
Okay.
So we had, for example, a course where some of the science teachers came to us and talked for 2 weeks about the latest things in chemistry, technology, astronomy, biology. It was awesome.
Yeah.
And then we did a lot of general stuff. So everyone had to do many, many things on education, both policy and application, sociology, psychology. So I would say for the first 3 years at uni, you do each semester at least one or two of these courses,
Okay.
besides your main things.
And you felt that was worth your time?
It was good. I mean, this was fully state funded. They were very generous at the time. Obviously, if you have 3 years and you have to pay for it, you don't necessarily want to do it like that.
That's true, yeah.
But at the time, the Hungarian government was engaged in this program that we have to catch up to the EU levels in education. That's part of it.
I see. And what did you do your thesis on for your PhD?
So my PhD was on action theory.
Action theory?
Action theory. And basically the issue that got me started on that was something about epistemology, the study of knowledge.
The study of knowledge.
Exactly. So this is a subfield of philosophy, and I had to do a paper on it earlier. And epistemology deals with kind of questions like, what is knowledge? What is the criteria of saying that someone has genuine knowledge about something? How do we come to acquire true beliefs? What are the good standards of rational reasoning to truth from previously held beliefs? There is a question in this field about understanding other people. Because we don't see other people's minds. Very often we can be confused about whether or not they did something intentionally.
I see.
And the whole group of issues around intentionality is just fascinating. It connects to responsibility, liability, criminal responsibility, blame, praise, all the interesting things in ethics and politics.
Absolutely. Along the same lines of intent, there's a puzzle that I'd like to talk to you about a little bit later that I think really encapsulates that idea. Before we get into that, let's take a step back and talk about a definition of philosophy, because I think for a lot of the younger students out there, they might have heard of philosophy, but they may not exactly know what it is. Okay. So in your words, how would you explain to them what is philosophy?
So I think there are two conceptions. There is a professional conception where what we say, people who work as philosophers at universities and academic institutions, there is a group of issues about the big questions. What is being? What is it to be a human?
What is the meaning of life?
What is the meaning of life? Is there a God? Is there a purpose to the universe, its existence? What is time? How should we live? What are values? What is good and bad?
Right.
All these juicy big questions.
Yeah.
There is, I think, a broader conception of philosophy, which most people share. And that encompasses, I think, any form of systematic, hard, honest thinking which aims at the truth. So in that sense, actually the word was used originally in that sense. A lot of scientists could count as philosophers when they sort of finish their experimental work and they start thinking about, okay, what are the implications of this for the universe? So in this sense, maybe, some of Stephen Hawking's books are sort of on the border of science and philosophy, but also a lot of religious things and self-help and other intelligent books, just thinking through where the world is going, could count as philosophy on this broader conception.
I see. Okay. And have you seen any mislabelings for philosophy, like what philosophy isn't?
Right. So sometimes people identify philosophy with a sort of approach to life, like just sit back and have hazy, confused thoughts about what you want to do with your life, or you're just criticizing everything. You're just talking about politics in not very organized ways. These are definitely not what we do as philosophers. So that's, just someone thinking through their own personal issues. Nothing wrong with that, but if you come to study philosophy, that's not what we're going to do.
Right. If you were to Google the word philosophy and click on images, I think some of the first pictures you would see are old statues of Plato or Socrates. Do you think that is an accurate representation of the philosophy on the whole? And if not, what would you put in its place to represent it?
Right. I think it isn't anymore.
Not anymore?
No. It used to be, but you have to see two things here. the methodology of these guys that they figured out in ancient Greece and before in India and China is very good. You're approaching things very critically, methodologically, and using very high standards of reasoning to get at the truth, which is what we do today and what most researchers do in any field. On the other hand, that picture suggests two things which are wrong. One, that everyone working in the field is an old white guy.
Right. Yeah.
And the other is that we have to have some awe or respect for the opinions of these people. We don't. That's part of philosophy that, there is a possibility to investigate any question as long as you do it honestly and you're aiming at the truth. You can ask the questions. The other thing is it has become, luckily, very multicultural. There are a lot of women now in the field. There are a lot of young people. If you go to the department, especially in the US or the UK, you're likely to encounter people from all kinds of background in the faculty, which is really encouraging, and I think it makes for a much better atmosphere.
Oh, excellent. So going back to the image that you would choose, if you had to choose, you're designing an app for philosophy, what's the icon?
Wow, that's a good one. Maybe you could choose, go really funky and just choose a nice group of friends discussing something.
Oh,
a really
okay.
cheerful manner. That's one way to do it. Another way would be probably with some kind of contemporary art piece which emphasizes the complexity and interrelatedness of things. These days, politics, science, society, they all relate in so many ways.
Right. That is absolutely true. And touching upon the last thing you said there in society, society and pop culture in particular is a place where we see philosophy every now and then, although it might be hidden. For those of us that may not think philosophy touches our life, can you point out some places in popular culture where we would see it?
Right. If you turn on the TV, you can see some shows like The Simpsons or...
The Simpsons, really?
It has a lot of philosophical references because the guys who wrote The Simpsons were actually really good maths and science students at Harvard, I think, or MIT.
Okay, is that right? Wow.
And they have all these philosophical and sciencey references throughout the show. Big Bang Theory is full of this kind of stuff, but you don't need to look for specific references. If you think through a lot of public issues, it's very easy to encounter philosophical issues behind them.
Right.
So think about 15, 20 years ago, there were huge debates about abortion, euthanasia, very controversial public issues. The newspapers were engaged, politicians were engaged. These are proper philosophical questions, and the whole society participated in discussing them. Right now, they're doing something similar in France. They're going to introduce at the government level a lot of new AI technologies, for example, in diagnostics at the hospital.
Right.
But of course, it's a bit murky at the moment. If an AI diagnoses you, who is taking responsibility for the diagnosis? Who is in charge of your diagnosis? Is it the doctor who is controlling the program? Is it the developer of the software?
Right.
Is it the person who's supposed to maintain it, the engineer writing the code? Do people trust it? Are they okay with having this kind of, blaming, praising relationship with an AI? And they're now creating a big public discussion with public committees and newspaper articles. So I think there are many places where it pops up.
I see. And philosophers are those people that would hope to come to conclusions to help governments or institutions develop policy?
I think so. That's one of the very popular fields. So many of my students, I left for the UK after Hungary, and I did my PhD there and stayed there to do some tutoring. So many of my students went on, and they're working for policy institutions now. There are so many coming up issues about bioethics, genetics.
Just this morning in the news, I heard that a Chinese scientist using the CRISPR technology was able to, I don't know if he fertilized the egg or if the child was born, but he edited the genes so that they were unable to contract HIV or receive that from the parent.
Yeah.
Would
Yeah.
this fall under the
Oh,
a
absolutely.
philosophical
Absolutely.
conversation? Yeah.
If you look at the discussions around human enhancement, that is, whether we can use artificial means like genetic engineering or certain types of steroid or medication, or even cyborg parts, attaching new parts to our artificial parts to our bodies, should we allow this? And if yes, when? And who should be able to do it? And how do we regulate it? I mean, one very interesting question which comes up immediately has to do, again, with society. Who will have the money to do this? You know, if the government doesn't provide this as a treatment, it's pretty unfair because some people will be able to have perfectly healthy children without any, problems,
Right. Yeah.
and maybe even with enhanced cognitive or emotional capacities, capabilities.
Right.
Whereas other people won't be able to afford that. But if the government provides it, it seems that that's very expensive and most societies can't afford it. So there's also going to be a huge global divide. Even if the US or Japan can do it, can the Chinese government provide this to everyone? Probably not yet, maybe in the future, but
Right.
that can create huge inequalities and ethical
Absolutely.
issues. And the other thing is, in a sense, we are humans, and everything from the way we evaluate each other at school, how that ties up with where we go to university, what kind of job we get, how we then do in life, how much we earn, what kind of place we can buy, what kind of family we can have, that all ties in with our capacity. If we start altering this, we might get, for example, a huge difference between the first generations who get this treatment and the slightly older, just a few years older generations who don't.
Right.
How are these people going to compete for the same jobs, for example?
Right. I mean, you see this with like industrial technologies and nations, right?
Exactly.
Those nations that were able to industrialize sooner have had a massive advantage on the global level. So if you were to bring that to humans and their biological capabilities, it would be a very different looking world.
So about this, I can maybe tell you there is a very cool research institute in Oxford. It's called the Hero Research Center. It's actually funded by a Japanese businessman,
Oh, is that right?
Yuehiro-san, and he had a profound interest in these kind of issues, bioethical, ethical, moral issues. And most of the philosophers working there are taking a utilitarian approach to solving these problems. So the utilitarian approach says that when we say good or bad, we really mean pleasure and pain. And there are different ways of quantifying these things. Economists have to do it, for example, when they distribute health resources in a society. And philosophers can use these means. So we can think through what if we allow genetic engineering in a society? What are the likely harms? What are the likely benefits? How can we quantify the happiness generated, the suffering generated?
Right.
And that's, maybe you can say that doesn't decide the issue in itself whether we should allow such an intervention, but it's a pretty good pointer. Obviously, if the gains weigh out the losses by a lot, then maybe we should go in that direction. There are many people who oppose this kind of research on the grounds that as humans there is something essential about what we are, and we shouldn't modify that in all kinds of ways. We're messing up society, we are messing up our system of values. So they think this kind of argument is not good to solve the issue.
Right. Are you familiar with Yuval Harari's book, Homo Deus?
Oh, yeah, it's a very good book.
It is an excellent book. He speaks about that quite a bit.
Mm.
I want to take a quick step back and ask maybe a more general question about how philosophers do their work. So if the work of a philosopher involves very clear thinking, using reasoning and logic,
Right.
but it's about these very tough issues that affect our lives, how difficult is it to keep personal opinion and beliefs out of the process of thinking about it? Is that something that you struggle with, or is that something that is easily overcome because you're a professional and that's what you have to do?
It's a very good question. I think it depends a lot on the individual. For me, it's quite easy, but I'm lucky, I think, because my parents are both lawyers. So I've
okay.
seen from my small childhood that when they went to work, they really had to leave their emotions at home. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to deal objectively with things which need to be decided by the law eventually.
I see.
So, but even so, I think sometimes, especially when you're thinking through hard ethical problems, um, attributing responsibility and the connection of responsibility to punishment. When should we punish people for what they do? Should we punish them if they know that they come from a very deprived background? Do we still think that they're in charge of their own decision? Well, it seems to some extent they are, in some cases they aren't. So we need clearer definitions and clearer theories. But it's hard to leave the emotions out, and you can see that with some philosophers. They actually engage their emotions and they put forward very spirited defenses of positions. What's very important is that you leave the emotions out when you listen to someone who is debating you. You should always be able to be charitable and adopt an objective approach to your own views as well. So I think that's sometimes hard. I often see that some students can't do it, and they really struggle with distancing themselves from something that maybe they inherited from their religion, maybe their parents, maybe their culture, a view about society, a view about the world. You know, people who come from my region of the world, we've been part of the Soviet Union historically. And there was a very conscious education against religion. So my parents' generation is usually very militant atheist. A little bit like Richard Dawkins. You know, not open to these questions at all. There is no God. That's the end of it. Whatever science says is true. Now, of course, very often scientists say silly things about bigger issues. They're always good on the detail, but, you know, someone might draw the wrong conclusions about the bigger picture because that's not their job, right? And in those cases, a philosopher or just a sensible person can point out the right solution. In these cases, it's really important to retain the openness to think through things objectively and say, well, actually, you know, this is what I think because this is how I was raised. However, the argument seems to show that that's wrong.
Right.
And I have to follow a reason in this because
that is philosophy.
Points to the truth, right? Yeah.
So for some of our younger listeners who are tuning in, they might be listening to this conversation and thinking, wow, this stuff is very heavy. But if I'm not mistaken, you're of the belief that philosophy can be taught from a very, very young age. Or if not taught, it can be a matter for discussion. So at what age do you think children are able to participate in a philosophical discussion?
So actually, I think it starts around 5.
5?
Yeah, absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely. If you look at kids around 5, they have the basic concepts in place. And what are the basic concepts, right? We all have some naive ideas about how the world works and how other people work. So what a 5-year-old can do is think about time, think about space, think about existence. And also a lot of other things like, is what daddy says true or false? So they can attribute beliefs to other people. Does mommy want to do the housework today, right? Or dad, does dad want to wash the dishes? They can attribute desires and motivations or the lack of them. There's so much they can already figure out about the structure of the world and the explanation of one phenomena by another phenomena. And you can ask them questions, and because they don't have the kind of inhibitions that older people do, you know, they're not ashamed to be wrong. They're not ashamed to try out different opinions. They're not ashamed to maybe say something silly, or they don't want to save face or be conformist. They just oppose you if they think you're wrong. They can be brilliant discussion partners.
Right. So I think it might be safe to say that you would agree that there's value to teaching philosophy to children early.
Exactly.
Okay. If I gave you the key to the education system and you were to create a curriculum, either worldwide or specific to a country, if needs are different, what would that curriculum look like? Would it be a class dedicated to it? Would it be an element of every class? that they're already taking, or would it be very informal, student-led discussions after the fact? What would it look like to you?
So my preferred method for this was not to push people into something they're very uncomfortable with. So the way I saw, maybe the best practice I saw so far, there is the Education for Philosophy Institute in the UK. And what they're doing is they offer an after-school class.
An after-school class.
People don't have to stay. So basically, it's at the school of the kids.
Oh, okay.
But it's up to the kids, really, whether they want to participate or not. They're encouraged to, but they don't have to necessarily.
I see, okay.
And it's not really about philosophy in the sense that it doesn't teach any history of philosophy, and it doesn't tell you, oh, you have to remember when Aristotle was born and that he was the teacher of Alexander the Great.
Right,
and so on. So it's more just, you play philosophy like a game. You explain to the kids that there is a question, and we don't know the answer to the question, but we have a method of figuring out the answer. We ask some questions, we make some distinctions, and then we construct arguments. But if someone disagrees with any of the steps in our argument or our starting point, they can disagree. We just teach them to do this respectfully. So always listen until the other person finishes what they're saying. And then the other person has to listen to you. And then maybe it's nice to ask a third person for their opinion on who is right and why. And always ask the question why. If you say something, you have to explain why you're saying it. And that's the trick of it. So the kids learn that. It's not just enough, to repeat what the teacher says or what they heard at home.
Right.
They also have to figure out the reasons for why they hold a position.
These sound like great life skills. Listening, following up your statements with reason. You mentioned games, like asking questions that we don't have the answer to. Can you give an example of one such game?
Well, kids love the time issue and the space issue, like whether the universe is infinite. And, you can just ask them to imagine the border of the universe. And obviously one of them will yell, there is no border if it's infinite.
Right.
And the other kid will come, but it's impossible that it's infinite because it's something. And already the discussion gets going. And it's so easy. You just need to basically moderate their discussion and help them to organize their ideas. Sometimes you can stop them, ask someone to put the main things on the board. Or, other things you can do is you can just first get them into it by having a vote on a question. What is your intuition? And then it's really interesting that after some debate, their intuitions change. And then you ask them, okay, now explain why you changed what you thought before. And they love it. They love the attention. They love the fact that they can, someone takes them seriously and they can really explain themselves. This is not, we find very often that parents love their kids, but they don't always get this kind of practice in conversation.
Oh, of course not. Yeah. Oftentimes the parents it's more of a one-way street where
a little bit.
They talk.
Somebody's too tired, too busy. And
that can happen.
Yeah.
Why, if there are so many benefits, why do we not see philosophy courses like this or in other forms in schools more?
That's a good question. I think traditionally it's just hasn't been part of the curriculum, and education ministries are very cautious about changing their approach because it affects so many people. There are now big movements and big campaigns to include it, and some countries do it already, but mostly at the high school level. So in France, for example, people have 2 years of compulsory philosophy education.
Oh, is that right? Oh, wow.
In Italy as well. And in the UK, you can do an A-levels in philosophy or philosophy and religion.
Oh, wow.
So there are many opportunities to study philosophy, but what many people are campaigning for in the profession at the moment is that it would be nice to introduce it at the younger level, if not for the content of philosophy, just as a skill development thing, because it might be useful.
Yeah. Listening, being polite, summarizing. These all sound like things that I think most teachers would agree that they would like to see more out of their students.
That's true.
Oh. So we, before we mentioned a puzzle about will, this could fall under the games category or a question that you could pose to kids. Would you mind explaining it? I think it's something about poison. Is that right?
The toxin.
The toxin,
Right.
yes.
So it's called Kafka's toxin puzzle.
Kafka's
because
toxin
Kafka
puzzle.
was a philosopher in the U.S. Gregory Kafka, a very smart guy, was mostly working on political dilemmas,
Okay.
like the prisoner's dilemma and nuclear deterrence.
Mm-hmm.
But these all have to do with the basic norms of our rationality. How
Okay.
do we reason in a situation where we have to decide whether we do A or B?
Okay.
And there are some norms governing the reasoning. People, of course, sometimes act irrationally, but then they don't follow the rules, and we know that they're not following the rules.
What would be an example of that?
Well, think about someone who wants to lose weight, but nevertheless they decide again to eat ice cream.
Right, okay.
It's pretty irrational because what you're doing is incoherent with your goal.
Got it.
So you can sort of point out why it's irrational. There's a norm that if you have a goal, your actions should be conducive to that goal. They should help you get there.
Right, okay.
So that's a norm of rationality. Your means should be coherent with your goals.
Okay.
And that's something we can discover by a bit of reasoning about our norms of rationality. Now, in the Kafka's puzzle, we encounter an interesting feature of our human mind.
Okay.
So the example is something like this. There's a millionaire who approaches you, and it's the afternoon, lovely Sunday, and he tells you, look, if you intend tomorrow at 8 a.m. to drink a very mild toxin, it will only make you feel a little bit dizzy. You'll have an upset stomach for a few hours, a little pain, but that's it. It doesn't cause any other harm. You have to intend at 8 a.m., though, to drink this toxin at noon, so 4 hours later.
Okay.
I have a team of an amazing neuroscientist who will scan your brain states, and they will be able to objectively tell me whether you actually intend to drink the toxin or not. So you have to have the intention to drink it.
And they will scan your brain at 8 a.m. or noon?
8 a.m.
At 8 a.m.
At 8 a.m. But you have to intend to drink the toxin at 12, so 4 hours later.
Oh.
Whether or not you get the $1 million he proposes depends on whether you have the intention at 8 a.m.
I see.
First, it seems that you have all the reason to intend to drink the toxin because you're going to get $1 million and, drinking the toxin doesn't cause you any lasting harm. You will have a bad afternoon, but it's a lot of money for a bad afternoon, so why wouldn't you go for it?
Right. Seems like an easy choice.
Exactly. But can you really form this intention, though? So the problem seems to be that when you imagine what's going on, after they checked your brain states and mental states through them at 8 a.m., you don't actually have to drink the toxin. That's not what you get the money for. You just get the money for having the intention to drink it at 8 a.m.
Right.
So it's very hard to be actually committed to drinking the toxin.
Because you don't need to drink it
exactly.
in order to get the money.
It's not a means that's necessary to reach your goal, right?
So
you can just think, and probably most people would constantly say to themselves, yeah, but after 8 a.m. at 8:01, I can just give up on my intention.
Right.
However, then you don't really count as intending because intending involves commitment to something.
Right.
So one really good definition in the literature of intention is that intentions are plans which we form to reach certain goals, and they help us structure our behavior. They're like policies we form to guide us in our life. But policies obviously involve commitment, and to revise a policy, to revise an intention, takes energy, takes time, and you have to have some good reasons to revise it. So it seems that it's pretty hard to actually form this intention to drink the toxin if you know that it's an intention you can give up on.
Absolutely. Would you, just maybe this might be a side conversation.
Right.
Can you actually chemically see intention in the brain? Is that something that can be measured?
Right. So there are big debates about this. I have a book with me at the moment. It's a very interesting book written by Al Mealy. The title is Effective Intentions.
Wow, the power of conscious will.
Exactly. So since the 1980s, many scientists and brain scientists have been trying to pinpoint what's happening in our brain when we make a decision, when we decide to do something, when we want to do something or intend to do something. And some people have drawn very reductivist conclusions. So they say something like this. We look at what's going on in your brain a few seconds before you raise your arm.
Mm-hmm.
And there's always the same thing going on. But that precedes the time of when this repetitive element is happening in your brain, precedes by a few milliseconds when you become aware of making the decision to raise your arm. So it seems that some previous event in your neural system determines reliably, causes every time that you raise your arm. That's really hard to explain what's going on there if you just first see the results.
Yeah.
Some scientists said, well, obviously, then your decision isn't really up to you, because whenever you make your decision, this thing occurs before in your brain. So obviously this previous event determines the decision. And hence, the decision is not up to you. It's up to what's going on in your brain. And it might be something you're not even aware of.
Right.
So they would say there isn't really free decision. There isn't really freedom. You're not deciding.
Which could be a dangerous position to take, because it means no one's responsible for their actions.
Well, it could preempt responsibility. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. But since then, there has been a lot of work done both by neuroscientists and philosophers on how to understand the results of that experiment. So basically, when you do an experiment like this, what you have to see is that the conclusion is not obvious. It's not like you look at the brain scans and it's written on your brain that this is an intention.
Right.
You just get a lot of noisy data of different kinds of chemical reaction and electrical currents running through different parts of your brain. They do form reliable patterns. However, whenever we do anything, our brain is always active.
Right.
So it's very hard to tell exactly which process correlates to which experience and which mental process that we are aware of, like deciding to do something, weighing up the reasons pro and contra. What this book by Mealy shows very well is that this kind of results don't really show actually that there is no decision. What they show is that when there is a decision, probably that's tied with our previous motivations to decide that way. But those can be our motivations, right? If I go to do an experiment where I decide to follow your orders, which you give me to raise my arm, I already have a standing motivation and intention to do whatever you want. So what the scientists actually detected as the reliable element, which is present every time before you become conscious of wanting to raise your arm, might just be this kind of standing motivation which you formed previously.
Oh, I see.
Of course, that has a correlate in your brain,
Right.
but it doesn't mean that you didn't form that. And in fact, if that has a relation with what you're doing, it seems that your decision pretty much determined what you're doing.
Right, right.
So you can interpret the data in different ways. And sometimes, people working in the experimental sciences are a bit rushed to draw a big conclusion because that brings in big funding and a lot of
Absolutely.
It's exciting.
Yeah. There's also a lot of implications to this, especially now with all of the developments with machine learning and AI, because one of the big fears at the far end of the spectrum of AI becoming out of control and going beyond what the programmers intended, for that to happen, it seems that there would have to be some intent on the part of the AI. And so I could see there being a big benefit to recognizing intent in humans so that we can recognize it in other forms of life that we may create. Going back to the question of or the research that they did they test whether there was any biochemical reactions when someone moved involuntarily, like a knee jerk, for example, when you go see the doctor, right? Did they compare and contrast an involuntary knee jerk to a voluntary knee jerk? And if so, was there any difference there?
Right. See, there is some research on certain types of involuntary actions, mostly the ones which are related to psychiatric disorders or, clinical issues. So some people have repetitive compulsive movements. There is I don't know if you heard about it, the alien hand syndrome.
I haven't, no.
Very interesting. Sometimes people with this syndrome lose control of one of their limbs.
Okay.
It's very often one of their hands.
Mm-hmm.
Very often the hand they use most. So for a left-handed person, left hand, the right-handed, the right
Mm-hmm.
hand. And what happens is the hand starts to do one of the fairly structured complex movement patterns which are repeated every day. So for example, suddenly your hand starts to unbutton your shirt and then buttons the shirt.
Really?
Because this is something, we have so-called motor memory.
Mm-hmm.
So after a time, when you repeat the movement many, many times, like the way you tie your tie, your shoelaces,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have to think about it. You don't have to spend cognitive energy anymore. You don't have to pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
And your body is saving a lot of effort by just internalizing some of these patterns without you having to, actually go through the steps consciously every time. That's doing something consciously usually takes a lot more energy for your brain and body than doing something automatically.
Yeah.
And in the alien hand syndrome, suddenly the hand just starts repeating these automatic movements. So this has been studied. And it's very interesting that the movement usually doesn't tie up systematically with the psychology of the agent. So the chemical...
The agent meaning the person whose hand is...
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, so if you ask you, what were you thinking about? Sometimes people report, I was just watching the TV and my hand started. I was at work and my hand started doing it. I was not thinking about anything, just lying back on the couch.
Yeah.
I was talking to my wife and I started doing it. And there doesn't really seem to be a systematic correlation with anything in our psychology preceding this. So it's really hard to attribute this to us as agents. So it does seem to be some defect of our chemistry in our body.
Wow.
But this is just one type. And there is a systematic chemical reaction which precedes this. So they're sort of getting at it and trying to develop some medication and treatment. But the neural causes of this effect are totally different from the neural causes of other involuntary movements. So you might think of, the way sometimes when you're falling asleep, your legs make a jerk.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, that's everyone's body does that. But that's also something we do unintentionally, involuntarily. It's not tied to any of our preferences, any of our motivations. It's our body's action, but it has, again, very different causes. And these are very interesting phenomena.
Wow. If I may switch gears here a little bit, I'd like to talk about philosophy as a profession. And I have here I pulled from Manuel R. Vargas's website. He's a professor in the Department of Philosophy at UC San Diego. And he writes, and I quote, "Philosophy majors outperform the rest of the humanities in terms of mid-career earnings by a large margin. Undergraduates go on to make more money than nearly any non-engineering major, including your average business management major. This includes those who go into marketing, journalism, nursing, political science. Philosophers earn more than them. And the Wall Street Journal consistently thinks that philosopher is one of the top 15 jobs in the U.S. When I read this, I was surprised, and I think a lot of people listening would also be surprised. Can you just talk about this a little bit?
Right. I think everyone was surprised when we got the data.
Yeah.
So, philosophy gets a lot of shell for training people to do nothing, sit back and just think about the big whatever, the clouds. And a lot of philosophers got interested and a lot of people deciding about funding going to philosophy because in many countries it gets public funding as it taught and researched at universities. Is this really so? Are graduates unemployable? Are we treating people who are, just going to work in really in jobs where they're going to be really unhappy? And it turns out this is not true. But what you have to see to understand this is that most people who do philosophy go and work in other fields. They don't become professional philosophers. Professional philosophers work at universities, research institutions, high schools. Those people usually earn well. If you work at the university, you definitely earn above the average. Probably the same in a research institute, not by a lot, but you earn probably middle management level money. but you do work a lot. In a high school, you earn all right in most countries, but it's not outstanding again. However, a lot of our graduates and a lot of my students did a BA in philosophy, and then they did a master's in business or IT or law.
Oh, I see.
And it seems that the skills you acquire by studying philosophy, they're very, very useful to going into these fields and doing well. So it's not just it doesn't only help you get into the training, it actually seems to show that you're well prepared for work in those fields.
I see. So this might be a good question to ask about the skills required to be good at philosophy. And this might translate into skills for other jobs. So what are the skills required to be a good philosopher?
Right. So I think some of the most important ones are to have a good reasoning ability, good logical ability in general. Mm-hmm. When you read when you hear something, you should be able to recognize what is the starting point, what are the basic claims, and how do those add up to the conclusions? How do the conclusions combine to further conclusions? You need to be able to pick apart these structures and see the relations between the elements in them. You need to be able to make really fine distinctions and figure out connections where they're not obvious between pieces of information. And sometimes this happens on the very minuscule scale, so you need to dig into a topic very deep. Sometimes it happens on a large scale. You have to connect two big related fields like ethics and AI and figure out something specific. You need to have very careful text reading and analyzing ability, which is probably useful in law and when you're maybe coding or thinking about IT issues. And you need good writing skills as well. So you need to be able to express yourself at least understandably. It's not required these days to be a very good writer, but you should be at least engaging.
Right. And certainly clear if a cornerstone is clear and logical thinking. So you mentioned writing. So I would like to ask you a question about English. So I think in a conversation we had a while back, you told me that the language of philosophy is very important because when you're talking about a topic in great detail, sometimes different words can mean very different things. And so you need to first understand the words yourself, but then agree upon language in which to use to continue the discussion. Is philosophy language specific? Would a Hungarian philosopher view one topic differently when thinking and talking about it in Hungarian versus in English?
That's a very, very interesting question, and thank you for asking it. I mean, in one sense, the language of science and all research, philosophy, all the humanities is English at the moment. So anyone who wants to have a career at the international level or even at local level these days, at a university or research institution needs to speak and read English and write English to a quite high standard. But as you said, there are some language-specific things. For example, I was debating an interesting question last week with two of my students. It's about voluntariness and whether voluntariness is the same as doing something intentionally.
Can you give an example?
Well, you could think about this. You could probably say that if you decide to eat an ice cream rather than work out, that was voluntary, or eating the ice cream was voluntary. It's something that is in line with your values, your decision, you are the source of your action. And it was probably also intentional because you had the motivations and your motivations got you into doing it. But sometimes these things can come apart, it seems. So you might have a case where we can say that you did something voluntarily but unintentionally. Think about this, for example. You are wounded in combat.
Okay.
And someone helps you to escape. they pat you on their back and help you to crawl away. That certainly, your escape was certainly voluntary.
Right.
Because it's in line with your preferences, right? With your values.
Right. To live and as opposed
Exactly.
to not live. Yeah.
Well, you probably want to survive. But it's unintentional in the sense that you might be unable to move your legs. You can't actually psychologically go through the process of forming the intention of escaping.
Right. Okay.
So it seems that your escape was something you did in the sense that it was voluntary and it was very much in line with what you want. However, psychologically, it's not intentional.
I see. Okay.
So this is one way of distinguishing between voluntary and psychological. Voluntary would, in this sense, be more an ethical notion, whether something was what you wanted, what's in line with your preferences. And intentional would be a more psychological notion, whether there was an actual process of you deciding and forming an intention to move, making a decision. Yeah. And these things might come apart in certain cases.
Right.
I think about another example is when you're forced to do something, a robber stops you on the street and tells you to hand over your purse. Well, you hand it over, which is intentional. Is it voluntary? Not really. You definitely don't want to hand it over. You're just forced to. You're under duress. So duress seems to negate voluntariness, but it doesn't seem to negate intentionality because you did decide. There was a mental process of you assessing, like, well, I don't really want to die. So I have to give it to this guy, but I'm not happy to do it. It's not something I want to do. I'm just forced to do it.
Yeah, those are two very distinct.
Exactly. However, I was talking with my Japanese students, and one of them said, in Japanese, the distinction is less clear, at least for him. He comes from the North, and he said that the terms he would use in these cases don't have the same kind of connection.
Oh, is that right?
My other student said, for her, it was sort of obvious. The same distinction seems to exist in Japanese, but then she said it's a very technical distinction, which was partly introduced when people were translating Western philosophical and legal texts.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
So maybe, some ideas about responsibility or intentionality were culturally a little bit different in Japan before. But now we can't really clearly tell these things apart anymore, probably.
Fascinating stuff. Is there anything on the horizon in philosophy that you're particularly excited about?
Wow, yeah, lots of good things happening, I think. One is that there's a lot more engagement with the sciences. There are many interdisciplinary programs, cognitive psychology, psychology and philosophy, brain science and philosophy. And recently, also, there is a renewed engagement with literature. Literature has been sort of sidelined in the last 50 years. In philosophy, people were focused very much on natural sciences. However, now people are looking at, actually, literature can be a very good source of understanding the experiences of different people through their narratives. And
modern literature.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Contemporary, up-to-date literature. There are so many human conflicts which are described, so many social changes which are described very well in a lot of detail. That can help us in making us more sensitive to certain kinds of reasons. So it can actually help us improve our ethical thinking or political thinking. Maybe another thing I would highlight is that philosophers have been luckily very proactive in engaging with the up-and-coming issues, with the AI and informatics-related issues and bioethics issues as well. So this is a good thing. They managed to get involved with governments and legislators. So I think we can preempt many of the risks of these new technologies.
Oh, I see.
Which is quite important. AI especially holds enormous risks, and people for a long time didn't take that seriously. And just to give you one example, one of my friends who is doing programming gave me this. You might know it. You can imagine a robot which has as its task to build the same kind of object repeatedly. If it's not programmed in a smart way, if its preferences are not set up in the right way, then it might end up using a lot of resources just to fulfill the single task, endangering a lot of other more important objectives of humans. So you could have a robot manufacturing some simple machinery, and the AI is getting better and better at prioritizing its own task, but it might lack the capacity to actually assess how important its task is.
I see.
So this is, of course, just a toy example. However, there are so many of these kind of risks that we need to think about when we give more and more power and more access to different kinds of systems, to AIs.
I want to get your personal take on this. The speed at which new technology develops might be outpacing our speed to decide what is ethical, what is not ethical, form policy, and then implement it to keep everything safe. In your opinion, are you optimistic or pessimistic about those two things happening at the same speed? Or do you think that technology is going to outpace our ability to maybe grow responsibly?
Wow. Yeah, there's certainly a risk there. However, I would say at the moment, I'm optimistic.
Optimistic, okay.
Yes, I'm optimistic. Maybe that's because I work in research and I see and meet a lot of the people who are driving the initiatives to put the right kind of legislative and regulatory frameworks and ethics frameworks in place before anything happens. There's a lot of effort, and there are many, many donations coming from the companies because the companies know that it's going to be hard to get public support for new kinds of products unless the research community says that this is reasonably safe.
Right.
Somehow, in this field, the researchers and media managed to join up in a sensible way.
Oh, is that
and
right?
I think we should see more of that all over the board.
Oh, okay.
Because this seems to be working fine so far. Just think about the automatic cars, the autonomous
self-driving cars. Yeah.
Exactly, self-driving cars. People started to get excited and worried about this about around 2007, where the technology was nowhere near of implementation, and some companies wanted to start doing road tests. However, the research community managed to exercise some pressure, and then politicians exercised some pressure as a consequence. So it has been phased a bit more carefully.
I see.
And so far we have seen very few accidents, and I think only 2 fatalities, which are very regrettable. But the driving hours of these cars by now are huge.
Right.
They've been on the road for years in some places.
Right.
So they drive much more safely than the majority of
humans. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if we take this kind of approach, I think in many fields we can minimize the harms. There might be unforeseeable harms or small harms, sadly, but we can get some really good benefits out of these technologies as well.
Excellent. We're going to be wrapping up shortly here, but before we do, would you mind telling us what you are currently researching or any projects that you're working on now?
Well, actually, I'm writing my book here in Tokyo.
Oh, is that right?
And that's about action and agency. So it's about my view of what a human action is and what agency in general is. So there has been an interesting debate about this in philosophy for some time, and the traditional idea, the standard view of human action was a very, what we call in philosophy, intellectualized view. Intellectualized doesn't mean that only the view says only smart people act. The view is broader, but it requires the involvement of some high-level mental states.
Okay.
So what the standard view says is that a human action is something that an agent did intentionally. And of course, we do many things unintentionally, but these are only actions if they have at least one description under which they are intentional. I'll give you an example. So when you go and turn on the light in the evening in your living room to make the room a bit bright so you can read, that's intentional. the same thing you did might have a description as you're scaring away a robber who was lurking around the house when he saw that the house was dark. And you scared this guy away. But that's something you did, but you did it unintentionally. But according to the standard view, these are the same action, just under two different descriptions.
No, I see.
So we can only say that scaring away the robber was your action because there's also a description of the same thing under which it is intentional. Now, I don't think this is the right view. I think it's over-intellectualizing action because it makes having an intention a criteria of acting. And I think acting is broader. Some animals which don't have intentions are capable of acting, for example.
Nice.
So I'm trying to put forward a definition which can encompass this broader range of agents, like dogs, monkeys, birds.
Right.
And then we have to give up on the kind of definitions which operate with these high-level mental states like intention or decision.
I see. How, I don't mean to put pressure on you by saying this, but when can we expect this book to be out and available?
Hopefully in a year and a half.
In about a year and a half?
Yeah.
Okay. I will bring you back on the podcast in a year and a half for your book launch.
That sounds good.
Yeah.
Now the pressure's on.
Yeah. So finally, for any students listening that have had their interest piqued in philosophy, do you have any suggestions on books or websites that they could read or visit? That would be a good starting point.
Yeah, I think if you're interested in the AI-related issues, there is a very, very good book by Ellen and Wallach.
Okay.
The title is Moral Machines. It reads very well, and it tells about most of the exciting and interesting dilemmas connected to philosophy and AI. If you're looking for something lighter, I would recommend maybe watching some movies which have a lot of philosophical content, like Blade Runner is pretty good.
Oh, okay.
For thinking through some issues about what is a human. Can we engineer humans? If we engineer something that's exactly like a human, should we give it the same rights as well? Can we make a human-like being and send it to war to die? It seems pretty horrible, like owning slaves, right? So all these issues pop up in the movie pretty well. If you're looking for something to read, there's a very good comic book. It's called Logicomics, an epic search for truth.
Wow.
And it shows a lot of fun and interesting stuff about how 20th century modern philosophy developed out from some interest in mathematics and psychology, actually. So a lot of the formative guys of 20th century philosophy were very much engaged with the new results in maths and physics and psychology, and some of the ways in which we do philosophy today are influenced by that. And of course, you mentioned the Harari book. That's also a good entry point, maybe. Or if someone likes Harry Potter, there is a very fun book called Harry Potter and Philosophy, If Aristotle Ran Hogwarts. So in that series, it's published by Open Court, and they have a lot of good books which are connected to popular movies, books, hobbies, running, cycling, hiking, but the essays are philosophical properly. So they address something and they use the content of those books or hobbies to make things a bit more easier to digest and more fun to drink through the issues.
More accessible.
Exactly.
Well, that's fantastic. We'll be sure to link all of the to the books and comic books and movies in the show notes so that people can find those easily. Well, I don't want to take any more of your time today. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and I look forward to reading your book in about a year and a half's time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It was very nice.
Pleasure. All right, thank you. All right, and there you have it. Thank you, everyone, for listening today. I'd love to hear from you, so please send your comments, thoughts, or questions, or just say hi at hello@inspiretokyo.com. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please share it with a friend. We are always looking for new listeners. And be sure to subscribe to us wherever you listen to your podcasts. See you next time.